Could we have your attention, please?
미국의 전화마가 또 기회와 세 막관디고 계시고 있던 게 오그마변에 세계 인데시니까스 로스코베네스케 비정도 템 니미테오 오에트스 이주바고스는 다만 게니 기치는다 소마기한도 미고한 주변 못 쓰나고 피때야 기기도 또 아니시나베 Anishinaabe vangi pakani ko kiti shigaga gitomen oestabe pakani ite yonjivang. Nishe watens da vona ko titam oega kitoeg. Anishinaabe nakonegen itasen da vonnem. Kitasen da van Anishinaabe nakonegen. Fimatizin shigatasen da van. Kenege go yev matizin. Ganyan kanotan oestaga kitot, gitska o fogan. Niwak kinonoin, minik o hoshime, kaya tobagak oesta, nimishomis fogan. Enjoy nima, enjoy nivagein. Gijoi nimende mitashma vonji jan, vonji ska o fogan hitam, chawama chiganon nagog. Mot synagogue. Kueven ito siya kati vatsa mo toinem. Kainingego ngikenda vokasi. Kainingego ndivenda vokasi. Wina hasokana, wina manitok. O katashindaman. Mita siya wansi viskaman so we akwan, migo ni we akwan na kung kakiskaman. Kimi nigo isyan. Okitagi yat ki jiwata goesa nicha kenzi yogote gavonjaya Mishmagyonjaya Yunjiganon Naguk. Yes. After having introduced myself in my dialect of the Anishinaabe one, over distance and over time, we have developed our own ways of describing things, but the essence of what I'm talking about is the same throughout Anishinaabe country. And I want you to know, Anishinaabe peoples are the largest north of Mexico and includes many nations or First Nations, but I'm going to address those slight differences because of incursion of our white brothers and sisters, why we have to be in their courts many times. First of all, I want to explain to you some of the concepts that underlie who we are. The laws that I'll be talking about, you are the law. You are the land. That there be no misconception about that. And where does that come from? That's the first part I want to explain. First slide, please. If you can see what I have on here, yeah, I know it's hard to see because of the sunlight in the back of what I have here. Maybe it's a little strange for all of us to start talking about a strawberry at the opening of Anishinaabe law. But therein lies the secret of what we talk about as who we are. Talking to some of the elders over lunch, Anishnikata Megi Noah, strawberry. Oteimen, Genino and Mishnikata Oteimen. Translation of Oteimen, heartberry. And yet that sounds just as sterile as to say family and say it's a fruit. But to us, it symbolizes the spirit of who we are. For you see, our language is filled with the heart. Dotem You're referring to the heart. Ndonjiva, ote. En dus een stauwing ote men mi say te wanjiva. The word wanjiva is in this picture. And I give credit. And I acknowledge the previous speakers. Those who talked about the ways as they have learned and earned their doctorates in the academic knowledge. I wish I had their knowledge because they worked hard to get that. I don't have that knowledge, the academic knowledge. My knowledge comes straight from our people over the ages. But I don't have any original knowledge. But I do carry the love and the practices over centuries of our people. So I have nothing to teach you that I've lost to share with you. So when I talk to you, I'm not talking about what I have picked up in books or elsewhere. I'm talking about what you already have. So my role in talking to you is to reawaken what is inside of you already as Anishinaabe. And so when I try to keep things simple, I don't mean primitive. I don't mean that we are backward. What I mean is we are so rich in humility when we call ourselves Anishinaabe. And let me get into that with this strawberry. I ask when I'm traveling around, speaking to child and family services, I say, I know you know how to say child. They say, yes, Avinochi. Do you know how to say family? A lot of them do not know how to say family anymore. The word, the ancient word, and we're talking about traditions. The word family is Ningotote. Ningotote broken into its two forms. Ningo, kiningo egate, also means embedded. So when we say we agree with one another, we say we are of one mind, we have consensus. When we say we are family, it's collective hearts embedded into one heart. That is the family. And that relates to your family of individuals, your extended family, your clan systems, your community. All hearts belong to that one part of your territory. And also means there's some discrepancies. People are asking, how do we say nation? We are a nation, so we'll use the English word. My belief is that every time, whenever there is a conflict in English words, and what we are talking about, go back to Anishinaabe when. That is your sacred gift, and therein lies your laws. But laws in the Euro-Canadian sense are different than what we have. For you see, there is no difference between the secular and the sacred. In other words, Canada, United States, they fight over the concept of religion and secular law. To us, it's one and the same because it is spiritual. The other part that you want to remind you of is that whenever there is a difference, what I'm saying to you is that I am not disagreeing with you. I'm saying is I agree with you. Because if you listen to one another, you are enhancing your understanding, enriching your understanding. That becomes your knowledge. So it's collective knowledge that we have. That's why I say, what is in you? Your elders are the ones who will provide the guidance as to what you mean. Because in Anishinaabe learning, it starts from an inspiration. You have an idea, you have an inspiration. Then you take it to your parents, and they tell you, okay, we say, they never say, Kawin, you're wrong. No, they say, and you should also think about this. They guide you that way. And then you enhance your knowledge, so then you begin to hope that this is correct. And the third part comes through belief. I believe this is right. I believe this is correct. And your elders again will tell you, now think about this. So now you're increasing your knowledge until you get to the point where you experience it and say, now I know. Well, what you know also shared with somebody else what they know. That is collective knowledge, what we call traditional knowledge. That is the process of learning in Anishinaabe way. But yet, by sharing that, you start to see some differences, and then you get to the point, where does that all come from? It comes from Gijemaneto, that we refer to in the English language sometimes as the Creator, the Great Spirit, God. And there is only one. And I'm not here to tell you about religion or talk to you or preach to you. That's not my purpose here. My purpose is to share, like I said, I have nothing to teach you, but to tell you that there is, from my experience and from my ceremonies, and from the knowledge of our ancestors, there is only one. And everything is alive, so there's no difference between the secular and the sacred. So that's what I'm talking about. So we say, Nikotote, talk it over in your communities. Talk it over in your history. Because Anishinaabe Nakonigein, Anishinaabe law, is not written in a book, is not codified as a criminal code or a civil code, not written in any way that you could refer to as Section 71 or Section 72. Certainly it is not in Section 9124, known as federal government is responsible for Indians and lands reserved for Indians. 6 words that has controlled your life ever since contact, particularly since 1885 and modified in 1976 when they consolidated the Canadian Constitution. With all due respect, that is not our Constitution. Are we to believe that we never had a supreme law that sustained us for all these centuries that we've been here on Turtle Island? Think again. We've always had a supreme law that came from the Creator. So these are the things I want to talk to you about. So now, as I come to you, and I come to visit you, I am one of you, Anishinaabe. Heard one of the elders, and says that he introduces himself as an Anishinaabe. Not as an alcoholic, not as somebody else's accreditation, but Anishinaabe. We are a humble people, but we are rich in so many other ways. That's one of the things I wanted to share with you. I also thank and acknowledge those knowledgeable lawyers that you have hired to talk about how to settle the Robinson-Huron and live up to the terms. Because you see, in the British Columbia Supreme Court, in their own decisions, they've said that the purpose of treaties is to reconcile sovereignties. And the federal government keeps talking about the rule of law. They've instituted Section 35, which contains our treaties and Aboriginal title, but it doesn't purports to define them. Our people do not define laws or describe laws. We live them. That's why it's so hard sometimes to talk about them. Because the way you live as a community, you are living your traditions, sometimes mixed and confused sometimes, my community as well, with the way things are given to us and dictated to us. The other principle, if you will, from the beginning of time, we never enforced our laws. We lived them. We complied with what was given to us. We obeyed rather than being forced. And this is one of the reasons why, in my view, our people overpopulate the penal systems. Because the reserve system was never our system. South Africa has done away with apartheid, which was based on the reserve system in Canada. They've done away with that. I talked about that with Nelson Mandela when he was here in Canada. And I said, we are essentially fighting for our freedom. And he said, you will achieve your freedom because it is yours, God-given. You will achieve your freedom. Your challenge is going to be, are you going to be any kinder to your oppressor than he has been to you? That is the challenge. So our system of laws, next slide please. I was asked to talk about something about governance and how it works and how it looks on the ground. I can't tell you how to do it. I can tell you what it looks like, but it's up to you and your community to apply it in your community, within your Ningotote as a people. Because Ningotote means a family, it means a community, it means Anishinaabe, and what they're trying to say as a nation with their long parts of descriptions. A nation is a people with a territory, their own laws, their own system of governance, and so on and so forth. Well, we've always had those, but we never called it a nation, called it Ningotote. So, next slide, please. So where does all this come from, and how do we call it? It comes from all life. Science also agrees with this. All life here on earth comes from the stars. And their grandfather that lights the day is also a star and gives us life. And so, all life here on earth comes from the stars. And we carry many names that refer to the stars. And so, when I say Kijewatasiwan, what are we talking about? Kije means kind, good, everything that is good. Kijewatasiwan, like Fimatasiwan, it's a way of living those gifts that were given to us. And laws to us are not enforceable in the sense of we need police. If you don't obey them, they're going to pick you up and throw you in jail. No, our people live according to and to compliance. You've heard many of your people telling you, they're not listening. They might hear, but they're not listening. Some will listen, but they don't hear. Some will hear, and some will not listen because of the confusion that has ensued. This is one of the things we are trying to reconcile. But that doesn't mean we got to go back all the way to 1492 and beyond, because our ways of life are fluctuating, they change. But the basic Midigo is still in place. Okay, so that's where you draw from. So, all life comes from the Creator. Our ancestors ruled their own lives according to sacred law. They were sovereign, using the French and English languages. They lived Kishewateziwin. The concept of animate versus inanimate does not exist. All is alive. From the tiniest grain of sand, that's alive. We use that in Medean because it carries a spirit. The smallest insect, that's alive. Are they conscious? Yes, they are conscious. Now, Ningotote, going back to Ningotote, which is all creation. The universe is alive. Is it conscious? Is it aware of itself? Yes, it is. And that heartbeat that I'm talking about, listen and watch a child in the cradle or sitting down. As soon as you start beating a drum, they start rocking. You've noticed that. They want to dance. Why? And why do we dance? Because you want to be at one with the heartbeat of life of Imatisiwin. Your heartbeat wants to synchronize with that. So that's the way we live everything. We just don't sit back and read about it in books and describe it and say, well, that's the way it is. But, again, having said that, I admire those people who have taken the other side and studied it, because one of our treaty negotiators in Treaty 3 back in 1873 said, the time will come when we will ask you to lend us one of your children, one of your sons, and one of your daughters to come and live with us, and we will teach them. We will show them our ways and what the Creator gave us. And we will give you one of our children to teach them that which is good according to your ways of life, and they'll come back and tell us. That is the education provision in Treaty 3. So you see what they were talking about. To raise our children together in peace and harmony. So, to understand one another. That was the provision that they had. So there's no separation between the sacred and the secular. Everything is sacred. So everything is alive and everything is sacred. Next slide, please. Now, where does this come from? The word inherent, the word intrinsic. I tell people when I speak in English, look at the word in here. It says in here. It means in ear, inerrant. Well, I take that literally, say it's in here already. That's what I'm telling to you. But it means different in our language. Where does it come from? How does it work? Here, I want to tell you something about our sacred ladies. There are 4 sacred ladies. One lady is the one that looks after all the rivers in the sky. My mother once told me, laying on the grass, looking up at the skies, she said, are you looking at the ladies that are in the sky, paddling across the sky? I said, what are you talking about, Mom? She said, there are ladies up there. They look after the rivers in the sky. One river I can tell you that science also verifies is called the Pineapple Express. It goes from the Hawaiian Islands and comes across and hits the Sierra Madre Mountains in California, and then they twirl up in the sky. And then they come back to the ground. So you ever wonder why so many storms like snow? Because the second lady is the one that looks after the rainwater that makes precipitation. And that's where the snow and but we're not capable of dealing with all those forces of nature in times. We heard this morning sometimes about natural law. I'm talking about natural law in a different concept. I'm talking about it alive, and what it is and how we must live with it. And so, that second lady came down in the form of a star. The first one came, she said, I have been sent down to be with you. Because the grandfathers were here, the rocks, the mountains, sand, gravel. Those are, in the Anishinaabe, the pipe that I just lit. Some people refer to it as just a rock, and they say, Fred seems to make a lot of sense, except that he believes there's a rock talking to him. That grandfather does talk to me. That's another different concept. Yes, that's where we get the inspirations from, in ceremonies. And all the things that we use, okay, they call them objects. They're not objects. They are living grandfathers, Atsokanak, and grandmothers. So the second one, first one came down, said, I will look after the rivers in the sky, and I will be with you forever. That's the one. The second one came down again in the form of a star. And she said, I too have been set down to be with you. I will be with you forever. And as she came down, it started to rain because the rain, the water that was falling, started to form steam. The first instance of the sweat lodge. You will need to be cleansed from time to time, she said. I will be with you forever. And as I come down, already the trees, the plants, everything that we see here were already being in place. And the third one came down in the form of a star again, and she said, the grandfather also sent me to be with you. And I will look after all the fresh water of the lakes, the rivers, the streams, underground, the fountains, the geysers, so that all of you may live. And by this time, the four-leggeds, the crawlers, the winged ones, the water beings, and all the plants were already being placed that needed nourishment. I will look after that water, and I will be with you because you also will need water to live. That's why we, as individuals, constitute on average about anywhere from 60 to 75% water. And the fourth one came down. I too have been sent down to be with you. Because now the grandfather is getting ready to place the two-legged upon the earth. And this one is going to be so helpless, so pitiful. Why we call ourselves Anishinaabe. Although he, I'm saying, stressing he, and I'll tell you why. Although he will carry the powers of the Creator, he will not know what to do with them unless we, all of us, teach him. We must be prepared to give our lives that this one may survive, which is why it is appropriate for us, when you place tobacco, to take that which is from the earth, because you are part of the earth. And I'm going to come back to that, part of the earth. And this one being so pitiful, it's going to take 13 times for the grandmother that lights the night sky for this one to even begin to touch the earth, grandmother. And so helpless is he going to be that he will have to be carried in water for 9 times that the grandmother shines in her full glory. And the other times, there's 13 full moons in the course of our seasons, not 12. But to the wisdom of our brothers and sisters, they've invented a calendar that has 12 months. We have 13. Now, there's a reason for that as well. But going back, this one being so helpless, this one will have to be carried in water, and the woman will carry that child for the grandfather. And so, when you are born, the color of your hair, the color of your eyes, what you look like, your stature, your characteristics are carried from the conception of the man and the woman, like the grandfather and the grandmother, they plant life. And so, you too have been conceived in a way by the Creator and by these women. And so, you are born. Sometimes not knowing what you're doing, and yet the child knows already, except as they grow, they're contaminated by earthly knowledge. And I say contaminated because they love their mother and they love their parents. And so that is the sacred role of women. And so that's why we do not mention, when we say Anishinaabe, we don't mention a woman there. Say Anisha, for nothing, no value. That's me. Nave, that's me, I'm male. No mention of a woman. So sometimes people took some liberties with that, especially in the time of Germaine Greer and the women's movement. You see, you guys, I've been telling you all this time that the women are dominant, they're superior. And what's the proof of that? I told my mother. I said, but mother, listen. Look at our community. Look almost in any reserve, including yours. The man always walks in front, clearing the brush, fighting the rain, the sleet, all the storms, and he walks in front. And my mother said, yes, that's true. There's a reason why, though. The main reason why the woman walks behind the man is somebody's got to walk behind him and tell him, turn left, stupid. Turn right, stupid. So, now, guys know why. So the man gets his ass kicked so many times. That's why I look at any man here on the reserve. They have no ass. Right? I don't have any. But you get kicked so many generations, got to go somewhere. Where does it go? It goes right here. So I share these issues with you because I like to keep things a little bit lighter so that they will, what I'm telling you, will stick, okay? So that's the story of what I mean by inherent. You've already carrying those gifts that were given to your ancestors within you. Why we have visions sometimes of our ancestors, why we go back to the knowledge and the wisdom of the ages. And we carry that with the duty to pass it on to our children. So, anyway, next slide. These are the water carriers, sacred water carriers. Here are the 13 full moons that I'm showing you that I was talking about. Next slide, please. Now, so where did the man come from? If everything came from the stars. Imagine this. If you look up at the sky and when you're fasting, as I do, you'll see 4 concentric circles. Why we do things in 4s. You'll see the little rattle drum, the small one. You'll see the hand drum, the second one. The third one, you'll see the water drum that you use in different formations. The water drum, the little boy, and the other drum, and the big drum at the outside one. 4 drums, 4 seasons, 4 stages of life. Everything that is in 4, the 4 directions, why we do things in 4. That's where it comes from. And so you see, if you look as well, study the biology of birth, the birth canal, you see there are 4 stages there as well. And then comes the man, and he is born. But women are also come through the same way. But remember, the women are sanctified already. So why are they sanctified and how so? Women are the ones that carry the duties. They're the ones that carry the laws. That's why you have to listen to Kokum, Nokomis. What about Grandpa? He sits there and he listens. Traditionally, you'll see, still to this day, the duty of the man is to protect the integrity of the woman, to defend. When I do traditional marriages, that's what I have to tell the man. Your duty is to be prepared to lay your life down for the sake of the family and protect the woman. Strange sometimes our customs are, because what happens sometimes, if I married a woman from the Sioux, I am obligated to go live with her family for 4 years to help that family provide for their family. It's my duty. However, if hostilities break out, if there's a war between the Sioux and my people. I'm obligated to come back to the Anishinaabe side. And the Whanok are obligated to go back to the other side. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Well, the genius in this thinking is, how long is this battle going to last, or is war going to last? If my family is over there, I will look for every opportunity for peace so that we won't hurt one another, my family doesn't get hurt. That's the thinking behind some of these ways in which we practice. That's called peace and harmony. So, Nave is the man and the descendant. There's two words that describe Anishinaabe. Nisinave, man descended. Nisina came down from those stars. That's the sacred meaning. The secular meaning, the common meaning is Anishinaabe. Okay? So we have to understand our language as well. So that's why there are four, and the four ways of our spiritualities. In the east, the eastern doorway, Wavanawin. The southern doorway, Shawnagawin, Tecumseh would have been an adherent to that. The western doorway, Okimawian. Northern doorway is Metiwian, which has consolidated all those other three, but those three have not been erased. They are still practiced. So, everything's in the fours. Next. So here we are on Turtle Island. Why do we call it Pikinakomenes? Because here comes the story of Nenavojo. In my part of the world, we call him Nenavojo. Other parts, in the United States as well, they call him Winavojo. He had four names. Those, Nenavojo, Winavojo. The second one was the Wiskechak. The third one is, you rarely hear these ones. The interpreter of good law, because all laws come from the Creator. Nenavojo was the first one that gave us the interpretations by which we live, which are immutable. You don't change those. You follow them in each way, in your life ways. And the fourth name was Keveashagame. Keve is another word for eternal. You heard the name Keve, Kwe, a sacred woman. Anything that's eternal to us is sacred. So Keve, Kwe, is the sacred woman. That's a name that I hear about in different parts of our Anishinaabe country. Because anything that's eternal to us was made by the Creator, and it has become sacred. So, Keve, Kwe, Keve Ashagame. And that's how our stories start. You talk about our stories. They're called legends, they're called myths. No. They are stories that relate the inherent knowledge. See, I'm using the word inherent here because it's many times it's the women that tell you these laws or these stories in the wintertime. Okay? So, you had four names. One of them is Menokonegit. Pardon me? Am I running out of time? Eh? Oh, I thought you were holding a microphone. They're going to tell me to shut up here. Miigwech. So, if you look at the back of a turtle, you'll see 5 little plates down the middle, 4 on each side. Count them, 13. It is told to us, our sacred stories, that the grandmother, every time she shines in her full glory, she comes down and kisses the turtle. Here we are on Turtle Island. And that's why. And if you ever doubt the power of a woman, the moon in her full glory, look at what she does with the tides, the oceans, pulls them every day. The power of the women. And they don't brag about them. You see, in a powwow, which, by the way, where does the word powwow come from? It's from an Anishinaabe term by the Narragansetts, who are Anishinaabe. Clean yourself before you go over there. So, put on your regalia, you clean it up, so you look pretty. But it's the men that carry all these regalias, and they sit around the drum as if making it appear that it's the men that are in charge. They're the ones that sing, they're the ones that beat the drum, and they're the ones that have all these regalias. And yet the women, what they do is they stand behind and they sing. In a sacred ceremony like the powwow, it's the women that are singing, but they sing in a nasal tone, singing the same song. That's to support the children that they've brought into the world. Okay, so they are very supportive. Humble, okay? But yet, their responsibilities and their duties are so sacred. That's the reason why. So that's why we call it this, and that's where Nana Vojo started. Now, when we say Vojo in my language, in my dialect from the northwestern Ontario, we are not trying to speak French. Not like Jean Chrétien. I can kill two languages in one sentence. You know, for me, I like to have two whores in my rowboat. You see what I'm getting at? Well, what we're getting at over here is we say, like Nana Vojo did, we refer to him because you are my brother, you are my sister, under that original ancestor that was talked about a little earlier. Nana Vojo, so we cut it short. We say Vojo, or you say Anin. Okay? So, and also, say my friend, we say Nichi. That word comes from Nichi Chatok, is what Nana Vojo referred to the trees every time. He was the one that named all the trees and all the plants and all the rocks and whatnot, and every time he spoke to them. Nichi Chatok, he saw how we refer to them. So the word cut down again is Nichi. We don't say Nichi Chatok, we say Nichi. So you see, everything comes from our language, which is the reason why I was saying that if you call them laws, they're not going to gain. They are duties. They're not laws in the sense of the Euro-Canadian legal system. They are duties. And so, when you talk about those, okay, that's what you're really referring to. I'm giving you the background here of what I'm coming to in terms of governance. Okay, so now you know where we are. And the heartland, of course, of Anishinaabe country. We have people in Texas called the Kickapoo. They call it Kickapoo and it never lasts. You had enough Kickapoo juice? You heard that. I've heard it. Anim Kigavo. That's where the name comes from. And so all the names that we have amongst ourselves, we are Anishinaabe, Nigotote, but because we refer to ourselves in our different localities, and over time, we have developed slightly different ways of saying things. We mean the same thing. That's why, for instance, when I was asked to testify in the Robinson-Huron court, the question, I understand, one of those questions wasn't asked of me directly. I heard about it. How can a man like Fred Kelly from Lake of the Woods know what the law was here? Well, I can tell you for one thing. I have relations in Garden River. I have relations amongst you, and I have clans amongst you. I'm related to you. I'm part of your family, and you're part of my family. And I also have an aunt that's a direct descendant of Shingwak, the lady that married my uncle. It comes from Lake of the Woods. So this law, supreme law, applies to all Anishinaabe, but it is localized within the community, within the individual. You talk about sovereignty, you talk about that as belonging to a people. Yes, I won't argue with that, except the difference is You are sovereign. You are sovereign. In other words, what does sovereign mean, the French language? Essentially, it means freedom. Your basic freedom gave you that. The Creator gave you life, reason, the ability to think, and the ability gave you will for you to decide on what you have reasoned out on the basis of what your community and your elders have taught you, and the freedom to act on that decision. That, to me, is what sovereignty really means, despite all the legalisms that have been written about sovereignty. It essentially just means freedom, okay? And it starts with the individual, goes to the community, and then goes to the family, and then to the community, and then comes to the larger. So that's why I say, if you're looking for a word you call nation, we are a nation, yes, people will understand, but they'll argue with you. You say, Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe, nobody argues with you. Because you know what you're talking about, like this elder Peter was talking about this morning or earlier. See, I don't disagree with him. I agree with him. I may explain in a slightly different way, but you mean the same thing, okay? So that's what we're talking about here. So what happens then? So that in Canada, here's how it works. They have a constitution. Some powers are delegated to the provinces. The provinces for lands and resources came from a case that took place in what is now Treaty 3, close to Wabigoon. And that was a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court of the land of the day, known as the St. Catharines Milling case. The end result of that case was the province owns the land and resources. What about the Indians who were here first? And what about the treaty? They have usufructory rights. What does that mean? That kind of floored me at first. What does that mean? It simply means they're here at the good graces of the province. You believe that? You believe you're here by virtue of the good graces of the province? Well, I have some expletives to describe that, but I won't use them here out of respect. But that is the case. And that's what Canada lives by. And the other provinces in the West, in 1934, in the land transfer agreements, they followed that ruling. So, you don't own the land. You don't own the land. Well, certainly not in the European sense, but you belong to the land. That's how you own the lands, because you're part of it, an integral part, irremovable. And you can't sell the land, but you can share it, and that's what this case is really all about. That I know was presented here so eloquently by these your lawyers. And so, those are the things that we are confronted with, and yet we are kind to them. We still want to show them the good way of life as we were given, not the adversarial way of life based on the doctrine of discovery. All these people who are over here, what about them? Well, you have to have in discovery, or to recognize humanity at that time, because of the papal bulls done by the Pope, you had to have some kind of technology. You had to have some literacy. And third, you had to be a Christian. If you were none of these, you were an infidel, you were a pagan, only to be baptized into the Catholic Church, the true church. And I do not argue here with any religion, okay? If it works for you, all the more power to you. I respect you for that. And I respect all spiritualities and all religions. I'm only telling you the way we saw it before contact, before we were discovered, by a man who had taken 3 trips to North America and still believed in his deathbed that he had been to India, which is why we are Indians. Well, think about it. What if he thought that he had been to Siam? We'd be Siamese. And worse. Anyway, so those are the kinds of things that we live with. And the Indian Act confirms, and also Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution, 1982, in which I was party to negotiations of, defines the Aboriginal peoples of Canada as Inuit, Indian, and Métis. And there it is, forever, in the Canadian Constitution. And we call ourselves First Nations. That did not change, because look at your contribution agreements. The definition section, Sagamok means a band under the Indian Act. There you go. It's erased who you think you are for purposes of the contribution agreement. And not only that, I am not Fred Kelly under the Indian Act. I'm 5401. I'm a number. I couldn't even count. And that's what I am. What's your status card? What's your status number? What's a blah, blah, blah. I was there in the mid-60s when our leaders negotiated the tax exemption from gas and tobacco. And you got to have a status card. Okay, so, and a card from the province that says that you are tax exempt. So anyway, those are the kinds of things that we have to reconcile. That's what I guess you're trying to say, reconciling sovereignties. There's some things that they will not touch, okay? But yet, we are Anishinaabe free, completely, unconditionally, without external definition. We are Anishinaabe, belong to the land. We are part of that land. This is why, go back to that Ningotote, strawberry. What does that mean? Oman donjiva. Wouldn't donja, yeah. Look at the heart again. The word comes from onjiva, ote, also comes from Ojibwe. They call me Ojibwe. Sometimes they call you Chippewa. This is a variation of that same foreign word, which means Ojibwe is how they define us. But you see, at the time of the treaties, our people said, Oman donjiva. This is where I come from. I belong to this land. The word Ojibwe comes from this word, Ojivik, which means root. Like the strawberry has a root. It has Ojivik. And if you look under the soil, you see all the network of roots interconnected with one another. That's the way we are. We are interconnected. Nigotote. So, you see then where the words have why we have to understand our language to understand the way our people have lived according to the ways that were given by the Creator. So, after the Turtle Island, okay, I showed you there just an example there of the five little platelets there, called the vertebrals, and on the carapace, what you call the turtle shell. So the carapace and the scutes, which are the. Incidentally, if you look all the way around, so you have a voracious curiosity. You'll see 28 little ones all the way around. And they tell me that my mother told me, there were 4 boys in our family, so my father died when I was 5. So there's nobody to tell us many of these things. My mother tried. But those scutes, or the 28 of them, seems to correspond in many ways with the menstrual cycle of the women. So there again, so everything that you need to know about this, about Turtle Island, is all in there, okay? And many of our stories have to do with turtle, according to Nana Vosho Gagi Ejit. So now, next slide. Now then, how else are we related? Dotem. I hear you referring to each other as Ndotem. And Viju Ndotem. And yet they mess this up again. Look in the dictionary, see what totem means. T-O-T-E-M. It's to refer to the totem poles. And with due respect, if the brothers and sisters in the coast want to use that, that's fine, as long as they understand. Dotem is an Anishinaabe word. Not what Webster thinks or said. Had an argument one time with a linguist, and he says, "What Webster said." No, never mind Webster. He's only one guy. So am I. So anyway, was you related? So to, by the way, now I want to mention to you about the dream catcher. The dream catcher. That is ours, Anishinaabe. If people ask me, do you know about the medicine wheel? How come you don't talk about the medicine wheel? I cannot use the medicine wheel. I understand it, but it's never been given to me in ceremony. And yet the dream catcher, called Sitaon, the protector. Okay? That's the one that gives you your spiritual identity. That's all I need to say to the spirits, and they know who I am. Okay? And I do thank the biology that was read out about the things I do, the things I'm accredited for having accomplishment. I haven't accomplished a darn thing. My latest accomplishment was climbing those stairs to get here. That's my only accomplishment. Okay, so the dream catcher, though, the grandmother spider sits in the middle of the universe, connecting all the stars and the planets, allowing only that which is good, capturing that which is not good for us. That's the story of the dream catcher, Sitaon. Again, another grandmother. You see? And now, but the other thing too is this. When people buy dream catchers, sometimes we look at the dream catchers made in Japan, made in Taiwan, and we pay good money for them. Yeah, because you can hang them in your mirror by your car, and they're good decorations. And people like to have feathers on them. But to me, what we forget are the tassels. The tassels that come down here, and they hang down. Those are equally important, because that resembles the dream catcher, everything that comes from the stars and through the four ladies, passing down your heritage. That's the tassel. Comes down through your umbilical cord. That's what that resembles. So, anyway, I thought I'd mention that. Next. Totem. Here is a picture, although you can't see it from way back over there, but it pictures all of the different animals and whatnot that has descended upon us as Anishinaabe. Okay, our relationship to the four-leggeds. The story is, the way I was told, where did the clan system come from? At a time when the earth was covered with ice. They're talking about the Ice Age, not necessarily the most recent one, because they say the most recent one happened about 11,000 years ago. And according to the archaeologists, there couldn't have been life over here past 11,000 years ago. And I tell them, I said, yeah, there's been some fossils that have been discovered going back 25,000 years ago. Oh, yeah, well, in geological time, 25,000 years, 11,000, give or take 10,000 years or so. Yeah, then there's been some discoveries going back 45,000 years. Yeah, well, it's in the same, so more or less that way. So anyway, and a dinosaur has been discovered just recently in Newfoundland that predates, even many, many of these things. Yeah, well, now we'll have to look at that one. Next. So now then, the relational law of creation. When it says over here, I'm going to talk about the Creator's law. I can only talk about it. I can't tell you the Creator's law. I don't know of anybody who knows the Creator's law, but I know people who know about it. Okay? That's why you cannot write your supreme law. A supreme law, so the Canadian Constitution, a Constitution simply means a supreme law of a people. The Constitution of Canada is supreme law in Canada. Ours is different, works from the bottom up. And so, I can only tell you what I have been taught about it and what I have learned through ceremony and whatnot. Our supreme law, kakagiwe hinakonigewen. Kakagiwe hinakonigewen. Kakagiwe means eternal. And like I said before, anything that's eternal is sacred. And it is in the strict domain of the Creator. So how can we humble people think that we can understand what the Creator's law is? Nanavojo gave some interpretation, and our ceremonies give some other interpretations. So it's our relationship with the four-leggeds, the flyers, the water beings, the crawlers, and all spiritual and physical life. Legitimacy of traditional governments is embedded in a supreme law or constitution. Credibility of governance is full participation, understanding, and free will of the people. That means, unlike the Canadian system, where members of Parliament or legislature, they all sit and they argue with one another and they pass law depending on who's got the majority. Our system is consensual. Everybody has to agree. Okay? And here is the transparency and accountability. When I was about 16 years old, we were told, my mother told us, well, the guy who was responsible for giving us the information, called Shamaganish. Okay, I'll tell you about Shamaganish. Where's that word come from? Okay, and he came and told us, we had a meeting, and here's what we talked about. We would like to have your feedback as to what you think, you know. Do you agree or not? Okay. And my mother would gather, we're four brothers in the family, and she would tell us, here's the way it was, and here's how they did it. Okay. So if you are asked, that's what you should say. That would be your contribution. So it comes through the mother, because she's the one that carries the law. We went to the Band Council. Here's the accountability. How do they account for one another? Is very different. Next day, the women again get together and they play cards or whatever, they visit with one another. They talk about the community, what happened last night or what happened. They just exchange ideas. They're not just gossiping. They're sharing what happened. And they say, all right. And then she came home and we had supper. And she tells us, so they had a meeting last night. Not once do I hear any of you guys saying anything. Essentially saying, what the hell's the matter with you guys? She didn't say that, but we sit there like bumps on a log with our heads down. Yeah, we didn't say anything. She told us the way it was and what we should contribute, or at least agree to. So there's your accountability. And I'm still saying to you that the moccasin telegraph is still more powerful than the internet. You guys know that you can't talk about a woman or even think of a woman without the community knowing about it. So this is so it means full participation, not just a majority. I have never attended as a kid when I was told to go to listen to these council meetings, sometimes take notes. I've never heard anybody say, well, let's have a resolution to this effect. There were no resolutions. It was all consensual. Mina ea inendamang. Mina ea. Kivishago endaman. Now, do we all agree? No, I disagree. Why? Okay. So we talk to you until I have agreed. I went through that with our people in Wisconsin. Take the fight, not to try to convince or persuade him, but to explain all the things that he thought about it. Next day, he said, yes, I agree. Okay? And here's what I think. So we had 100% consensus, not just a majority. Because if you have the majority, 51% agree, what happens to the 49%? Isn't that laying the battleground? So you have consensus, okay? That's the way it was. That's why it took a long time. That's where the word Indian time comes from, too. It takes so bloody long for them to agree. No, there's some people just sit there, they're thinking about it. Doesn't mean silence doesn't mean you agree. Silence means simply you haven't spoken. That's all it means. So, anyway, so the free will of the people. Now, next. So it's kakagiwe nakonigein. Kakagiwe means eternal. That means sacred law. That's what I refer to it as. So laws of creation, if you will, are duties. Laws, as I said, to us are duties. We talk about the 7 grandfather teachings. I call them 7 grandfather learnings because we live them. And I use these, the Big Dipper. Take the 2 stars out for now and just concentrate on this cane here. And there's 3 more. There's 8 stars. That is your eagle staff. To remind you where the eagle staff is. And you see it up in the sky. That reminds you where the eagle staff is. And you see stars going underneath. Shooting stars, as they call them. Okay? So everything's alive. Now, put those 2 stars back and you have 7 stars. Which now, in my view, you drink life from these 7 teachings. And here we disagree sometimes. I say the 7 in English are love, kindness, sharing, respect, truth, courage, and humility. Oh, you forgot honesty. You forgot this. That's where I go back and say, all right, what I'm talking about is as you understand it. See? As you feel it. Okay, as you live it. That's really what I'm talking about. So, okay, so that's the eagle staff, and that's the 7 laws of creation. The hummingbird, I put hummingbird in here because here's what happened. The first one that was called upon was the eagle, called upon by the Creator to come up. And so, the eagle was given the responsibility to look after all life. There's different other responsibilities, of course, but mainly look after all the life of the territory. That eagle, that Pinesi, sits on Animki Ocho and comes to visit with you. And so that one sits on Mount McKay. Now, who's Mount McKay? Or who's McKay? I have no idea. And does it really matter with all due respect? No. It's Animki Ocho. Thunder Mountain. And when that Animki lands on that, you should see the storm falling, pellets of snow, sleet against that hill. That's when that coming in for a landing. My grandmother told me, I suppose now because I told you this, you're going to have to go find out. I did. I had to. And man, I've never been so scared in my life. I thought I was going to get blown away from that. But look at it now, in symbolism only. There's that Pinesi. Look across the bay, you see Nanawojo. Symbolism. Okay? And that's what it looks after all of us. And the second one that was called upon was Ochichak, the crane. I know that some of you have Ochichak over here as your... And that's the one that was given, the power, the medicines. We talk about Mishkiki, gives all those powers, and the powers to heal. That's the one that was good. And if you see me in ceremony, I will shake my rattle and I will say, wah, he, wah, he, 4 times. Why? That's the sound that the Ochichak would have made when the Ochichak came down with those blessings and gifts from the Creator, and was heard all over the world. Okay? The third one was the raven. And the raven was given the intelligence to look after the intelligence. You know how smart and how they can be, tricky, not? That's what they're given. And the fourth one that was called upon was the hummingbird. And the hummingbird was so shy, so called upon. He said, I can't go up there. I'm too small. I'm too weak. And the ladies, the four ladies, sacred ladies, told the little one, come on up, we'll help you. So he went up. And as you reached the Creator, flew around the Creator listening, and hovered for the first time, hovered forward, backwards, and it was a very drab gray color. When I say drab gray, as gray is not ugly. It's just, it's not as pretty as some other colors. So the hummingbird was given that, and in return for that, the people will notice you by your colors. And the Creator gave them those beautiful colors of the rainbow. Not right there, but as you start coming down, it's too small. So you start coming down when I ran into that lady that carries the rivers in the sky and got all wet. And too wet, too heavy, couldn't fly. And so the lady told me, she says, well, go away from there, go into the sun. And when it went to the sun, that's when all those colors start showing on that beautiful hummingbird was given. That was a gift. And the gift that the hummingbird was given was those sacred 7 laws, or called teachings. And what they do, when you're sleeping and you're wandering in the sky, Kagakiwe make another eternal road, the sacred road, which we call in English language the Milky Way. That's where you're wandering. And as you step, that's where you see the stars. They look like flowers. That's why our women, when they make moccasins, they use. That's the Anishinaabe floral design, flowers. They use those beads. And that's where, because the stars look like flowers in our dreams, or we're wandering around the dream world. So that's what was given to the hummingbird as well now, coming down. So excited with all that, he came down. And then, now you see the hummingbird. You rarely, if ever, I've never seen the nest of the hummingbird. It's a rare gift if you ever see that. Okay? And then, what the hummingbird does, it flies with great speed, and was given that beak to reach into the flower and take out the nectar of life, which is what you would drink from that Big Dipper, and to spread that around from flower to flower as it flows forward, backwards, so on and so forth. So that's the 4 birds that I can tell you about. There are other variations of this particular story, but I thought I'd mention the hummingbird, where they come from. Next slide, please. I'm trying to get in a hurry over here because I think there's supper hours approaching. So, now, Kakiwe Nakanege, an oral society like we are. We are not a writing society in the Euro-Canadian sense. Like, in other words, we don't use an alphabet, and we don't use that numerology. But we know we have counted, and we wrote in our own way. So the word Ojibwe comes from, I told you, the root. That's one explanation. The other one, Ojivi, rock paintings. After all, writing and painting is really to create symbols. And that's why you see them all over the Great Lakes. Okay, so, and then the other ones are in birch bark scrolls. So, Ojivi, that's us, that's our people. We wrote, we had a writing system. That sure didn't look like the alphabetical system. And I counted the number of letters in the Canadian alphabetical system that I use as Anishinaabe. We probably use about 11 to 13 letters. That's why our words are so long. By the time you get halfway to pronouncing your phonetics, you've forgotten where you started from, so you say Vosgeau instead of Nana Vosgeau. So, and so Kagiui can be referred to as a constitution, which simply means the supreme law. The Anishinaabe Constitution is a sacred and legal possession. Application of the Constitution is localized in the territory and the community. Here you are. Canada has a constitution that applies to across the country with some certain powers delegated to the provinces. Here, you, by virtue of being Anishinaabe and a citizen of your people, you delegate certain powers to your leaders. And here I must tell you, Ogimakan, as we say in my dialect, Ogimakan, you say Gima, okay? We understand one another. Gima is not a boss nor has full authority. Traditionally, Gima is the first among equals. See? And our election system was totally different. So when you talk about those kinds of policies, then how are you going to do it? That will be determined by your community. And your community could be a little different from the other communities. That's because you are the people in the community. And I'm going to come back over here and explain to you the difference between a community and bands. So, it is localized in the community because it's localized in the sovereign of the individual. Next one. Nature of Kagiwe Inakunege. Constitution is not in any foreign symbolism. The language of all Anishinaabe law is Anishinaabe when it must be understood and interpreted in that language. So, you don't have a Supreme Court that sits over here. Here's what it says. You have a common understanding as to what it means and how it's going to be applied in Anishinaabe when. The mere translation of English law or French law is not Anishinaabe law. It's merely a translation. The true meaning, spirit and intent of your duties is in Anishinaabe when. That's why it's so important. I believe Alan Corver might have referred to that this morning, why it's important. Okay, so translations are subject to the true meaning in Anishinaabe. It is sui generis. I use that legal term because it means distinct and unique to you. It doesn't depend on anybody else. It is yours as Anishinaabe. As Anishinaabe live it. That is exclusive meaning. Next. Law of belong to the land. See, here's what in our treaty, and our people thought the same, because when I said, how can this guy understand what the law was over here? And I know that there's references in the discussions leading up to a treaty of 1850, known as Robinson-Huron. Okay? What they said. I will tell you, is what our people said. They asked him, so we had the laws of the Queen. You will live by them. And our chief negotiator said, I will tell you what the Creator told us when He planted us here. Planted. I'm planted here. When He planted us here, He gave us rules to live by rightly and govern ourselves rightly. That's what He said. So, in other words, we had our own ways. Is one way we say it too. I've heard this term. I come from this part of the land. I am also intrinsic to all that lives. All that lives, smallest grain of sand, the trees. You're part of that. Nanavojo was part of that. You're part of Nanavojo. Okay, so that means, how can you separate from yourself? I can sell you these trees. I can sell this land. You're selling yourself. Can you do that? I don't think so. Okay? So that is the difference between laws of Canada and laws of the Ontario. Say, you own this land. We own this land. So, I'm also intrinsic. Dinayamaga means all my relations, spiritual and temporal. You go to Ote's family, we are rooted in the land, Ojibwe. So I can't expound on that or enforce it any more than I've been trying to say all along over here, that you are part and it's inseparable from the land. Next. Anishinaabe communities. Here is the Anishinaabe communities. Anishinaabe communities have a constitutional right to organize themselves and to settle anywhere within their traditional territory, and so you have. As your people, ancestors traveled across, picking blueberries, doing any traditional activities that they did, fishing, they moved around their territory. Those were fishing stations or hunting stations. They became reserves under the Indian Act. Now, you couldn't move out of that reserve unless you had permission of the Indian agent. They became POW camps. And that's why you're stuck in that saying, you can't go outside. Couldn't go outside. That has now changing. Because we've been fighting that for our freedom. The nation respects and protects its inherent jurisdiction of its communities. Here is the difference here. The province will tell the municipalities what they've got to do. Here it's different. The community tells the collectivity what it wants to do. That means the law here in this community is the law of the nation so far as this community is concerned, but may be slightly different from the next reserve, because that community has also got the freedom. So it's the communities that tell the collectivity rather than dictating the other way around. Okay, so that's another fundamental system. There is a fundamental constitution distinction between a community and the corresponding First Nation. Next, I want to show you this. First of all, contact Anishinaabe relations. And I have explained to you that we are the largest nation north of Mexico. And here are the river systems that we use north and south. From the east, we used what is now known as the St. Lawrence River, which I call Kinosiivi. And we also use the Mississippi River to engage with the Cherokees, the Choctaws, the Catawbas, those nations along the Mississippi River. And Mississippi comes from the word Anishinaabe, Mishizivi, because in those days they used to describe anything that was big as Mishi, not Kamishchak. So we say it, Mishizivi, and that name has stuck. So, and our people also, get this now, this is really, sometimes people say I'm stretching this. Our people went as far as the Caribbean. Why? How do I know that? The Little Miga shell, a long time ago, they said that the most revered shell within the Mediterranean came from the south warm seas. That's the Caribbean. And don't forget, thousands of years ago, Cuba and all those islands were part of the mainland, which is now Florida. And you have to remember that in what is now Florida, to the Rocky Mountains, to the Northwest Territories, following the Sierra Madres and the Rocky Mountains, coming over to the Appalachians, formed a bowl, which was known as the Inland Sea. And there were sharks on the sea. It was a sea in the true sense of the word. So people wonder, say, Lake of the Woods, there's sturgeon, name. How did they get there? The sturgeon is closely related to the shark. The sturgeon has no bones, it has cartilage. And there's a game that comes from that. That came from the time when this was an inland sea. When it receded, they formed Lake Agassiz. When Lake Agassiz opened up, it formed these 5 Great Lakes. Okay? But this was Anishinaabe country. None of us wandered all over. Forever walking the shore. That would have been the lake. And that would have been known as the Great Bear Lake. Makwazag Egan. Okay, so going back, way back in history here. Now what was left are these river systems. We used, the St. Lawrence River now it's called. We called Azazizivi, which is the Missouri River. That goes to and connects with the Churchill or the Saskatchewan rivers, Kazaskichuang, the rippling and rustling water. That's an Anishinaabe word. So it's ZZV, and then we use the river systems going to the other sea, which is the Hudson's Bay, the Churchill Rivers. So anyway, we use the 4 directions. And so we have people all over. As I mentioned, we have people in Florida. We have 7 communities in California. They're not called reserves or reservations, they're called rancheros. And we have the Miami, we have many people that down in Texas now, and all along there. And we have people as far, as far as the Rocky Mountains as well. So that's Nikotote, that's the Anishinaabe. We're related to them. The Cheyenne, for instance, they came from what's now known as James Bay and Garden River, Sault Ste. Marie. They came here. They lived with us there for some time, and this is their story that they told me. They gave me a replica of a gun that they used to kill Custer, gold-plated. It's a little gun, it's a rifle, but it's like a pistol. So you can see how they could ride horses and shoot from under the horse, okay? Which reminds me, I've got to tell you another story over here. I was telling a kind of a history to the orientation of grade 12 students who were going to go to Carleton University the next year. And I was about finished. And I said, so if there are any questions from you young students, I'll be happy to try and explain them or answer them. Walked in a guy over here, a blonde-haired guy. He's obviously the captain of the hockey team. He's obviously the quarterback of the football team. He's obviously the student council president. He is all Canadian, flanked by 2 beautiful blondes as he walked in. Of course, he's got to make his presence known. So he says, yes, I have a question. Yeah, what is that? I'll try and answer it. He said, how come Indians always go and ride around on the horses and they ride back into the hills? Well, I couldn't resist that one. I said, I would love to see you riding bareback on a horse with nothing on but a loincloth and see and hear what kind of noises you'd be making. The girls laughed, and I missed something there. I said, yeah, try it. Anyway, these are the rivers. So we had indigenous nations that we related to by way of covenants. And we're going to be celebrating that next May with the Haudenosaunee. Okay? So this is going to involve you and all our people, and that's going to be held in Onondaga, okay, to re-practice that our covenant with them, renew that treaty of friendship, which determines respect for territorial integrity and cultural integrity. Okay? So they're going to be celebrated. So it's still alive. And provincial boundaries don't mean anything to us. The U.S. boundaries don't mean anything to us in our law. But in practicality, we can't get across unless they know the boundaries. I always get a kick out of when I come back from a different country. And there's East Indians over there at the customs. They ask me, so, what do you want in this country? What are you doing here? A question I could very well ask you. But so anyway, and then on that note, I cracked this joke back in 1965 when I was addressing about 3,000 university students. And they were talking anti-racism because the topic was racism. So I cracked a joke. And I learned my lesson there. The joke I cracked was, there's nothing wrong with the white man, except he's overstuffed, he's overfed, and he's over here. So anyway, we're getting close to the end of my presentation here, okay? So, next. So, nature of indigenous settler relations. First of all, our Indian nations, let's call them that, indigenous nations, were first treated as trading partners off the west coast and the east coast and the Grand Banks, fishing traders. Then allies when they got into fighting over supremacy, who was going to be dominant on this land. And then treaty partners. You see, treaty partners, there's 3 ways in which you can claim a land as yours. One is discovery by terra nullius. There's nobody there, so it's yours. We were not considered as human beings. We're just animals. There's nobody here, so the discovery. And you know the doctrine of discovery that started this whole thing. Okay, so then partners in possession of land. Okay, and seizure of their lands. Then all of a sudden, wards of government under the Indian Act. So we are just items. We have no freedom. Here now, what they forget, people don't quote this enough. What was told to the Royal Governor General Murray, first Governor General in Canada, he was given pursuant to the Royal Proclamation of 1763, induced by Chief Pontiac. You know, it's Chief Pontiac, our Anishinaabe, that formed a whole alliance of our people. And he told them, you are raping our land, you are raping our women, giving them fire water to our men to take over this land. If you don't change, we're going to get rid of you. And so they ran from Fort Detroit. They ran over to paddle all the way back to England, reported that to the king. And the king did not issue this statement from the royal palace. It was the English Board of Trade that drafted up this document. So now you can see the commercial and the monetary and the resources aspect of that royal proclamation. But initially, they were told, and you are to inform yourself with the greatest exactness of their number. How many are those people? And inform yourself with and the nature and disposition of several bodies or tribes of Indians. What is their disposition? What do they think and how are they inclined? And of the manner of their lives and the rules and constitutions by which they are governed or regulated. That's a historical document. Canadian government recognizes that treaties and the Royal Proclamation is part of the Canadian government, and yet they talk about the rule of law. What happened to this? So, those were the instructions. Next. So, the consecration covenant of treaties. Once consecrated, a covenant or treaty is for as long as the sun shines, the grass grows, and the rivers flow. My. The poetic language of the noble savage. We're poets. That doesn't mean poetry. I'll tell you what it means. It means as long as the sun shines. When you shake hands with somebody and make a covenant, the grandfather lights today is a witness, makes it holy, consecrated, the agreement. As long as the sun shines, and the rivers, the four ladies I was talking about, as long as they bring water, as long as the grass grows, as long as there's life that comes from the earth, that's how long this agreement is going to last. It may be poetic, but there are legalisms underwriting that. The covenant or treaty is part of the Constitution. It has become part of our Constitution, but we live it, we honor it. It is spiritual. The language of the treaty is Anishinaabe. There are written records, but they are not always entirely accurate or consistent. Because if the treaty exists, the parties must pursue a mutual understanding and fulfillment. That means it's forever. It's a living document. Next. How much time we got there, Mr. Chairman? How much? Okay. Next, then, I'll cut to the framework. Okay, talk about the wampum belts, the eagle staff, the drums, the pipes, songs, and binding spirit and intent, and offerings and goods as we exchange. Okay, and the solemn handshake. That's important, the handshake. If you look at the treaty medals, say the number of treaties, you'll see the commissioner and one of our people shaking hands. You see the sun, you see the rivers flow, you see all that, symbolizing that one medal. That's not where I get this, that's where the medal draws from. Go ahead, next. Next one. Well, this is important. The nation is not in a place. It is a people with a sacred relationship to the land. The territory is on Turtle Island. It is in Canada only by virtue of the treaty. The nation is not in any province. The provincial boundaries are not in Kagiwe, Nakunigay. The communities are located in places, but they are comprised of their people, not the places. So, it's the people again. Next. So, the Indian Act. The Indian Act controls Indians and lands reserved for Indians in Euro-Canadian law. It is not Anishinaabe law. The Act controls Indians before birth and after death. How does that work? Works this way. It controlled me before I was even born because my father and mother were given numbers. My father's number was 5400. My mother became 5401. And so I became, what I am now in my own right, 5401. So your children already have a number even before they are born. And they're going to come under the Indian Act. And if you die without a will, the government of Indian Affairs, or through the Indian Affairs, will take over your estate, whatever estate you may have. So, the Act is still dominant, but will become less important with the assertion of Anishinaabe jurisdiction. The nation is not governed by the Indian Act. Neither is the treaty. Remember those. Next. Okay. The communities. This is important, I believe. A community is a people. A band is a creature of the Indian Act. It is not Anishinaabe law. Communities have in practice almost legally merged with bands. Renaming them as First Nations did not fix this. I said that earlier. The communities are located in places, but they are comprised of their people. Reserve, originally a place of customary use in traditional territory, then placed under the Indian Act. Each community has its own cultural, historical, and constitutional meaning versus the Indian Act Registry. What that means is this. This community has a history which is constitutionally recognized by Anishinaabe law. So, it does not come under the Indian Act, it comes under Anishinaabe law. And so, it's not controlled by the Indian Act Registry. So here's the difference. A community, in my community is, Onigami Anishinaabe. That's the community, that's the people. The name place, we call it Onigami, which simply means portage or portage, however you. The band is Saviskong. That's what's registered as under the Indian Act Registry. And we have 4 reserves, 35B, 35, so on and so forth. So, that's the difference between Anishinaabe ways and the Indian Act Registry. Next. Here's the one I'm going to end up with, okay? This summarizes really what I've been talking about. There are 4 levels, if you will, but they're all rolled into one as our Anishinaabe law. Kagiwe Nakunigay is the aspects of sacred law, the supreme law, which is constitutional. It is spiritual and cannot be written. Understanding in sacred ceremony and lodges. It cannot be written. I did some workshops with a elder from 6 Nations who was Haudenosaunee, Mohawk. And he said, our mistake was allowing it to be written. Now there are about 100 versions of written of the Constitution out there, none of which agree with one another, because it's written in a different language, and ours is oral. So you live it. So what's the Constitution? You've got it in you. So that's the Kete Nakunigay. How did our people understand then what was the Creator might be thinking? Through Nineveh and through our elders. It's Kete Nakunigay, the old law, or traditional law, if you wish to call it that. And it comes from our lodges. It comes through Wavanoan, Shawanoan, Ogemawian, Midewian. That's why we're always in ceremony. We're seeking the vision and the spiritual meaning of these laws. And some are recorded in birchbark scrolls, painted visions, painted rocks, petriforms, songs, stories, other mnemonics, other means of remembering. So that's where that is. Anishinaabe Nakunigay, on the basis of Gete Nakunigay, now what you understand, you can use your customary law, which means lifeways. How and when you pick blueberries, how and when you pick wild rice, how to use the resources. That's your customary lifeways. You can write those, some of those you can write. The written law made by Anishinaabe must be consistent with all the above, may be used to harmonize the administration of Anishinaabe law with other laws. Here I wish to tell you that we've done this here in Treaty 3, and I've been involved with all that, and our laws are now being recognized. But it is not the sacred law, it is not those other laws, it is only the written part which we use to harmonize with their laws. And that is now being used to twin the highway from the Manitoba border to Kenora. It's also being used in other ways, such as Nuclear Waste Management Organization. Okay, so it is possible to write those, but they must be consistent with the other, with the previous orders. And that's really all I wanted to share with you, because there's a lot more, but we're going to run out of time again. So anyway, but having said all of that, I wish to thank you because you are Anishinaabe. You live those laws, whether you understand them or not, okay? So, miigwech.
Miigwech, everyone. Fred, we have Chief Gima from Dokis. Duquette is going to present you with a gift on behalf of everyone here. A small token of our appreciation. What a accomplished... Fred said he doesn't accomplish anything, but he's such an accomplished individual that carries all his Anishinaabe responsibilities, and he carries them well. Miigwech, Fred. Thank you. Miigwech. Many thanks. One more round of appreciation for Mr. Fred Kelly. Okay, just a couple of quick announcements. We're going to have our dinner here. The fish fry will be served here. So you'll be able to serve that